Hi, welcome to another little bite-sized bit of information as part of our Summer of Love. And I'm delighted to welcome Toni Shelbourne this time. Hi, Toni.
Hiya, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Good to see you. We've obviously talked in longer form before, but it's great to have your expertise and passion to join the Summer of Love today. And the topic we're looking at is anxiety with dogs. Now, when we think about emotional well-being, that can be cover a broad spectrum of things, of course, but many people will have dogs who will struggle with something but might not necessarily see it. And actually, what are the things that I get with when I speak to the general public is, oh, I didn't know dogs could get anxiety. It's interesting, isn't it, that we perceive that, and I think that might be because of the way that we perceive behavior anyway, about thinking about labeling it as being bad, difficult, dominant, or something else. In fact, often that animals' ability to cope with what's going on around them is already being compromised. So let's dive straight in then about some of the things that we need to understand regarding dogs with anxiety, as in a definitional point of view, and also the things that we can be observing and looking at, and the things that we can think about for helping them.
Well, absolutely. And I think it's really important to understand the difference between anxiety, fear, and phobias, because they all are slightly different. And although you can have anxiety and fear, they are, again, still different. So I always think about fear, I always describe it to people as, you're on the motorway, somebody cuts you up, your legs go to jelly, and you're like, oh my goodness, that was really scary. But it doesn't affect you the next time you're on a motorway. You don't hold on to that. It's a fleeting thing. It's a fleeting emotion that happens. It's a survival mechanism. It's there and it should be gone. Of course, it takes a while to get your stress hormones out of your body, but, generally speaking, you don't hold on to that. A phobia is slightly different. It's an intense fear, but then that gets stuck in the brain. So if you think about those dogs who have had a firework go off on, over their heads, and they've absolutely panicked. And they're absolutely fine when there's no fireworks going on, but the next time there's a fireworks season, the brain says, oh, that's a scary situation. I need to react in that same way. And phobias are quite long lasting. They're hard to shift. Anxiety, this is the interesting bit, is anticipatory, really. It's something that is long term. So those dogs that might have been frightened by a firework, suddenly they'll be frightened by a car backfiring or a crop scare or something else. They start to kind of generalize that kind of anxiety, that fear, more in a general wider view, as it were. So they start to anticipate things. So, a dog who may be being attacked by another dog anticipates another dog coming towards them as going to do the same thing to them, and then they react. So it's in a different part of the brain. It's in the frontal part of the brain, but it's not in that nice rational part. It's in that bit that's going to hold on to those fears and those anxieties, and kind of, it manifests itself day by day. And when we look at anxiety, it comes in many forms, doesn't it? So you get the dogs who are absolutely over the top, jumping up, grabbing you, spinning around, looking like they're just really boisterous and being very naughty, but actually they're showing their anxiety through that outward over arousal. And you can go all the way to the other end of the scale and get your catatonic dogs, those dogs who lay in a bed for months on end and don't do, just look like statues. They don't move at all. So, we've got those two ranges, and within, both ranges, you get lots of different kind of markers. So, for example, with the over-aroused dogs, they might hump you. They might hump other dogs. They might just do lots of spinning and pacing. They might be a bit of aggressive. They might be a bit reactive. They will be, their heart rate and their respiratory rate will be up a lot of the time. So there's so many different ways they can show it. And often, especially those over-aroused dogs, they just get labelled as being boisterous and over the top and, not being able to concentrate. But that comes from anxiety, doesn't it?
That's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because sometimes, even to somebody who isn't necessarily trained to look for some of the signs, they can recognize the dog might be struggling. But sometimes that anxiety can come out in more of a fun appeasement way, a silliness. And especially when the dogs are younger, that can be a sign that maybe that dog's getting a bit over aroused, or having a lot of things that they have to try and work on and deal with.
Absolutely, and you know, of course, dogs will go through those difficult stages in life as they're growing up. And sometimes those anxious, if we're not recognizing that anxiety, that then will go on as being something that will generalize through the rest of their lives. Because we know dogs go through fear periods, they go struggling when they're teenagers, all of these things. And if we can get to them at the right time and help their people to support them, then often, you know, we might be able to help them to get over it, or at least be resilient to it. But we also have to recognize that sometimes that, and a lot of the time, it's anxiety is genetic as well. So there's not a huge amount we can do about the actual genetic anxiety that's come from their mother or even their grandmother. But what we can do is build in resilience. So how quickly can they recover from being, you know, worried about a situation? Can they learn that that situation isn't so bad? Can they learn to have some other coping mechanisms? And I think that's where things like Pet Remedy really come into play, because it's part of our program, right? It gives us a little bit of, you know, it helps them to calm down. We can add in a bit of TTouch. We can add in a bit of behavioral work. We can offer them so much from different angles. So I always think that the Pet Remedy is just part of that jigsaw puzzle, but a really important part, because it's going to help support that dog long term.
Yeah, for sure. And I think especially how we use Pet Remedy now, not just at times of kind of crisis, but more generally as an emotional well-being support. And also, I think, listen to what you're saying there, Tony. I think there's a lot of value from what you're saying there about understanding that just because a dog is a bit more anxious in certain situations, even just by slowing things down, giving that dog more time to process, giving that dog time to have more choices, can be hugely important, can't it?
Absolutely, and that's why I love, I mean, as you know, and as lots of people know, I'm a Tellington Touch instructor. And Tellington Touch is just a great way of just helping those dogs to be able to manage themselves, to have rational thinking, to be able to process what's going on around them, to be able to ask for that support or get that support from their person. Because a lot of the work we do in TTouch is teaching the person how to support their animal. And that's the thing we need to do, isn't it? If you don't have that support, you're always going to be struggling. Whether you're human, whether you're an animal, whatever, you know, nervous system you have, you're going to struggle unless you have that support from people. So yeah, that TTouch stuff for me is just so good at being able to bring them into that thinking, learning state where they can take information on, and they can learn, they can process. And like you say, slowing it down. We talk about chunking it down a lot in TTouch. Always chunk it down into smaller little bite-sized pieces that the dog or the cat or whichever animal we're working with can cope. Because we know that the pressure is really good, isn't it? So a bit of pressure we learn from, but stress we don't. So it's all about just giving those animals experiences where they can say, oh, this is a bit, oh no, maybe it's okay. And I don't have to do it for very long. I'm only in that situation for a moment, or someone's only touching me for a moment, and then it stops. Well, okay, maybe I can try that again. So yeah, that agency is so important, and it's something we're starting to talk a lot about in the dog world, isn't it? Giving them those choices.
Sure, and I think there's predictability over outcomes for the animal, feeling they have some kind of input in that. I think is really important. And also shifting, a lot of dogs who are a bit more anxious, animals more generally, same applies to us, have a bit more of a pessimistic bias when it comes to outcomes, which doesn't necessarily mean that they think something bad's going to happen always, but not necessarily something good will. And it's creating more of that optimistic outlook, which can be hugely transformative.
Yeah.
You say about the support, it's really important. We're going to be doing a lot of in this series actually about the support side of things. If you're listening to this and you have an animal that you feel is struggling with aspects of the world around them, definitely kind of slow things down, definitely do some good observations yourself, keep a bit of a diary and think, oh, it's interesting, actually they seem to struggle more at this time of day or more in that situation. All these things can be helpful. Speak to a vet, look for people that are suitably qualified and experienced and understand the emotional side of things, and that means a progressive positive support. But also to look for people who are running there's a lot of really good online stuff now. There's some not so good stuff, I know, but we're going to help you navigate to the good stuff. And you've got some great online self-paced courses for those people that can support some of these things that haven't done.
Absolutely. So through the TTouch community, we've got a learning platform now. And of course, back in lockdown days, we had to take everything online. And then we realized that actually we could reach so many people, and people can learn really easily from self-paced courses or courses where they come and work with us online. So I have a course on anxiety, I have a course on firework issues, on traveling issues, on dogs that struggle at the vets, one on cats. You know, I've got so many now, canine compulsive disorder as well. And you can do most of these just as a self-paced, but then the anxiety, I've also got a live course coming up for that as well in October. So people are finding it really useful.
And also, of course, you've written and co-authored a really excellent book series. So we'll make sure that we highlight those as well, who wants to buy a book and do some self-learning themselves. That's been really helpful today, Toni. Thank you so much for offering your time as part of the Summer of Love.
Thank you for inviting me again. I really enjoy doing these, so it's really nice to connect with you.
Well, thank you, Toni. And do look out for some more of these bite-sized informationals about different topics for multi-species. Thanks, Toni.
Thank you. Bye.